Welcome to training number two. You may think, well, this is the first training I've been to. That's because we call our interest meeting, which I'm assuming that if you're on this meeting here, that you've already been through an interest meeting. That was your training one. So this is training two, getting ready for the Amazon. If you're on this training, it is an absolutely gorgeous day. You get extra credit. But let me tell you this, we believe in training. We believe that as you get better trained, that everybody wins. The missionaries are going to win, you're going to win, your team's going to win, the villagers are going to win because you're going to be better prepared when you step foot in that village. So let's talk about that. Unfortunately, Priscilla's not with us today to share the Portuguese lesson. So what I'm going to do, she made this great video called the Portuguese Top 10. I want you to go to our YouTube channel and I want you to start practicing your Portuguese. When we do the debriefs at the end of trips, one of the most common things that people say, I wish I knew before I got here. I wish I knew how much I could use Portuguese. Now, you're not going to be fluent, but we're going to give you some basic words that's going to greatly improve your trip. Just being able to say good morning, bom dia, boa tarde, good afternoon, boa noite, good evening, or good night. And you will be amazed how much better your trip's going to be in the villages and on the boat if you'll just spend a little bit of time learning just a little bit of Portuguese. Again, it's not Spanish that they speak Portuguese on the river. And so learning a little bit will go a long way. So please spend time with that. Go to our YouTube channel, just look for Amazon Outreach, find our logo, go to our training session and find the Portuguese top 10 and Priscilla will guide you through in much better Portuguese than my East Texas Portuguese will allow. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump into travel prep. So, Chad, would you explain how they can get ready to get on the boat by the things they need to be doing today to get ready?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first thing is, if you're in this meeting, hopefully you've already filled out your AO trip application through Managed Missions. We do have some leaders that just like to add people in, but we really ask that you go through that application process. And there's multiple reasons for that. One, it's going to help that trip goer, like some of you, it's going to help you have your own accounts. You're going to set up an email and a password that you're going to be able to log back into your managed missions account and keep up with all the important details as you go through the next few months before your trip. And so, um, really encourage our teams to use that application link as opposed to our leaders just filling that out for everyone. It's going to make sure that everybody's information is up to date and so on and so forth. It's also going to make sure that we get our waivers signed. At the end of your trip, you're going to have, well, even during your trip, you're going to have opportunities to do some jacare hunting, the gator hunting. You're going to do swim with dolphins, some of those things. And so that just makes sure that we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed if you go through that application and fill out those waivers. For any teams that have minors that are not traveling with a parent, especially, they need to fill out the Amazon Outreach minor release form. And really, my teams, even when we have parents going, my boys, I have two teenagers that go and always fill this out just in case we were to get separated. And really, what this form is for, it's as you're traveling, through immigration, especially coming back into the United States. I've been on teams before where we had, minors who were unaccompanied by parents, and the agent at the gate, at the immigration gate, wanted to know, well, who are you with? Why are you here? And you can pull out that form. This person has permission to travel with our group, and there's really no other questions asked. And so that's really good to have. You want to make sure that you have that for your minors, especially those that are traveling without a parent. And so a lot of the things we're going to talk about today and in the coming training sessions. You're going to hear us talk a lot about go to our resources page. If you go to our website, amazonoutreach.org, you go to resources, you're going to find several different tabs there. One of the most important tabs is what we call important team information. It has about 20 different listings of different materials that you're going to need. And so that's always a great resource. You go to resources on our website. You can find a lot of information. And then if you can't find that information, then certainly you can ask your team leader. And if they can't find it, then certainly that's what we're here for, is for you to ask us. But on that resources page, you're going to have a link, a PDF for all the vaccines. That's probably one of the biggest questions we get, especially for first timers. Well, what vaccines do I have to have? And Some of you will be glad to know there are no required vaccines to go on this trip. There are certainly some that we recommend. And so you can find that list, there on our resources page on our website. Probably two of the ones that we recommend the most are your yellow fever vaccine. It's a lifetime vaccine once you get that one. So that's a good one to have. The doctors that I go with, they say, you're probably not going to get yellow fever, but if you did, you will wish that you had had that vaccine. And so that's one that's probably more highly recommended than others. And then certainly a malaria preventative, which is just an oral antibiotic. We do encourage you, if you get the malaria pill, the oral antibiotic, get the one that's the daily. Don't get the other options. And so you're talking about doxycycline, you're talking about Malarone. Those are probably your two best options there. But typically, you can go to a family health provider, maybe a travel clinic in your area, and they'll be able to give you all these meds, as you prepare for your trip. We'll talk here in just a few minutes about visas. A visa is required to go into Brazil. And so we'll talk about that process here in a few minutes, but that's something that you will want to get started on pretty quick. But before you can get your visa, you need to make sure you have your passport. All right. You can't even apply for a visa unless you have a valid passport. And so if you already have a passport, what I would encourage you to do is make sure that your passport is good for at least 6 months post trip. And so like if your trip ended today, March 1st, you want to make sure your visa is good at least through September 1st. Okay. Is that right? Yeah, September 1st. And so at least 6 months. Now, I will tell you, if you look on the website for the visas, they'll tell you that it's actually, if you start, Googling information, it'll tell you that it's not required that your passport is valid for 6 months. But I can tell you from experience, it is certainly recommended that your passport is valid for 6 months. And so if it's not, go ahead and renew it. That would be my encouragement to you. We've had visas before that were not denied simply because the passport was not valid for at least 6 months. Again, it's not a requirement, but it's all in the eye of the beholder of those agents. And certainly, once you have your passport, you're going to want to keep it on your person throughout the duration of your trip. We'll talk about this again. It'll be your last video training right before you leave, but do not ruin your trip by losing your passport or your visa, as it were. We actually had a guy last year that got all the way to Miami out of Texas without a visa, and then unfortunately had to turn around and go back home. And so, with your passport and your visa, like I said, you want to keep those on your person as you're traveling. And so that's what we call the three touch rule. Okay, there's really only three places that your visa and passport needs to be. Number one, it's in your hand. Okay, on your person, in your hand, physically holding it, getting ready to show it to maybe to the gate agents, to the passport agent. And so occasionally you're gonna have to hand it over, at the ticket counter for the airlines or what have you. But make sure you get it back. Don't walk away with your plane tickets and without your passport or your visa. Make sure you get it back from the agent's hand. And then otherwise, as you're traveling to the airport in the airplane, you want to keep it in a secure place. That's in some kind of a zipper pocket. If you have a clutch purse, maybe a person wears a fanny pack. I don't know, but some people like the lanyards, but make sure you keep it on your person. Probably one of the biggest things that we see happen. My boys have done this before. My youngest last year, my wife, fortunately, she caught it, but do not put your passport and visa in the pocket in the seat in front of you on the airplane. That is the best way to get up, get off the plane, and leave it behind. And now you're going to be in a real mess. They will not let you back on the plane to get those documents, and it's going to be a circus. And so, again, the three touch rule is keep it on your person, either in your hand, the agent's hand, or in your secure place on your body. All
Yep.
right. And so with that said, with some of those logistical things out of the way, we really want to focus on, really the purpose of this trip, and that's the spiritual preparation. We want to focus on the divine appointments that the Lord has for you and for your team. And so I'm going to let Steve share with us about that.
All right, one of my favorite spiritual prep scripture verses, chapters is Ephesians chapter 6, where Paul talks about spirituality in military terms because there's such a parallel. And so while we're getting prepared with visas and passports and vaccines and all those practical things, they're important. But this is the whole purpose here, the spiritual reason. You're bringing light into dark places, and you should expect certain things, and we want you to be spiritually prepared. So let's talk about being spiritually prepared. The first one would be to anticipate challenges. Listen, you're entering into things that we don't fully understand. We know that Satan has a grip on some villages. We know that he does not want the kingdom to expand. And so we should not anticipate, because we're in the center of God's will by going on a trip, that everything's going to work out all right, even before we get there. So there's going to be potential challenges that are going to come your way that might even shake your certainty about this trip. It could be financial, it could be health, it could be family, work. I would just say, don't let things shake you. Be prepared. Occasionally, it's undeniable that maybe you need to pivot and not go on the trip that you've committed to, but that's going to be only maybe 1% of you that could happen, that things out of your control might lead to that. But just don't be a fair weathered believer. Just anticipate when things get tough. That's just part of the spiritual activities that are happening. I love John Piper's quote. He says, "You cannot know what prayer is for until you know that life is war." And we are in a war zone, and the weapons of our warfare, one of them is prayer. And we just want you to go into this anticipating challenges. I've been on many trips. Some of them have gone smooth, and I'm more surprised when things don't happen. But I would say half the time nothing happens, but on occasion it does. It's perfectly fine because I'm prepared spiritually for whatever comes our way. Another thing, speaking of prayer, is to recruit 5 people to pray for you daily during your trip. The best way to do this, most of you are going to fundraise, you can also prayer support raise. So whoever you ask, and we're going to do a training on how to fundraise, but as you do that, we want you to parallel that by building a prayer team that's going to pray for you every single day. I challenged our staff this last week to put 9:38 on their alarm to go off every day. And that's a verse where Jesus talks about the villages being wide into harvest, the laborers are few, pray for laborers. And so at 9:38 every day, our staff's alarms are going off and we're praying for the teams, for the laborers. And so I want to encourage you to ask your team. Just put 9:38. Matthew 9:38 is about praying for those going into the field to labor. I want to encourage you to fast. I don't know if that's a spiritual discipline that some of you may have never done. A traditional fast, and what I would typically do is just 24-hour fast, meaning I eat my dinner at 6 and I don't eat again until the next day at 6 and only drink water. But you can do other kinds of fast. It could be the whole week. Maybe you fast from social media. The point of fasting is giving up a physical pleasure, enjoyment, or need for a spiritual purpose. So, anytime that you're fasting from food when you're hungry, it's a call to prayer. You're fasting from social media all week. When you think about clicking or looking, that's a call to prayer, and it's giving up the physical needs and pleasures for spiritual purposes to draw us closer to Christ. It's a very, very valuable discipline to be spiritually prepared for your trip, especially as you hone in on that last week with all the busyness. You want to make sure and stay connected to Christ. I want to encourage you to especially lean into the Gospels. The villages are much like the first century, and there's so many stories in the Gospels that will relate: water wells, fishing, farming. They live very simple lives. You'll be amazed how the Holy Spirit will recall stories that are going to be so fitting as you are serving in the villages. One time I was sharing the gospel and a rooster crowed. I mean, I said, there's a time in the Bible where this happened, and talked about not denying Jesus. So get into the Gospels. The Word of God is going to help your soul prepare, but especially the Gospels are rich for doing ministry in the village. There's the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but there's also the Gospel of Steve and Chad and your Gospel. That's the story of what Christ has done in your life. That's going to be one of the most powerful tools that you bring with you. Some of you have never shared your faith. You've never, I'm sorry, shared your testimony. We're going to teach you how to do a 15-second and a 3-minute testimony. This is very important because most people's testimony, unless they practice, are way too long and aren't to the point. And you're going to be doing it cross-cultural through a translator, so your testimony is twice as long as it normally would be. This is so important that you prepare spiritually to get your story down in a very concise way, and we're going to give you the tools to do that. So please be prepared. Some of you think you're not going to, and you're going to get called on unexpectedly. So go ahead and prepare now instead of getting thrown under the bus on a trip. Learn to share the gospel. I don't know who else on this call or who watches this video, but some of you have never shared your faith. We want to give you some tools to do that. If you'll go to our YouTube channel, Amazon Outreach, there's an evangelism playlist. The most powerful tool, I believe, on the river is the evangelism ball because they love soccer. It's like religion. There's machete evangelism, I'll show you, Trinity evangelism. There's also a video on how to refine your testimony into 15 seconds and 3 minutes. And so all of that's going to be there to help you prepare. We're going to spend a little more time on evangelism and how to ice break and some things on our future training, but it's going to be up to you to really be prepared if you get asked to share the gospel, to have a relevant way in the village to share your hope in Christ and how they can know Jesus. So check our evangelism playlist on YouTube. All right, now let's transition into another spiritual activity. Usually, the first miracle of a mission trip is this one here that I'm going to pass over to Chad. So, Chad, talk about this miracle, but what they can do to help make this miracle a reality.
Absolutely. It's like Steve said, fundraising. Yeah, we have seen the Lord provide for this trip in so many incredible ways, in individuals and in teams. And we have Joshua 3 listed there. You think about the Israelites as they're crossing the promised land, they were told to put the ark into the Jordan River, and then the waters would stop so they could cross over. It wasn't that God stopped the water and then you could cross. It's like, no, you have to step in. You got to take a step into this. You got to take a step of faith. And so you guys have all taken that step of faith. If you're watching this video, if you're on this call today, you've taken that step of faith. You said, the Lord's called me to go. And so now, there's a means to an end. We've got to do the fundraising to make sure that we get there. And so, um, again, certainly this is a spiritual discipline. Start with prayer and understand that you're not asking for yourself. I mean, ultimately, you're asking for the Lord. The Lord's, called you on this trip. He has a divine appointment or appointments for you and for your team. But even if you want to get very technical with a person, to help frame this in your mind, you're asking really for Amazon Outreach. You're asking for a donation to Amazon Outreach just to help further the ministry of delivering medicine and delivering eyeglasses and ministries to children, teens, men, and women. That's really what you're asking for. And so, again, start with prayer. We just talked about spiritual disciplines, and this is certainly part of that. And again, if I could just encourage you, I have seen the Lord answer people's fundraising prayers in just incredible, almost unfathomable ways, except you just say, but God, right? And don't say no. Don't say no for people. It's very easy for us to go through our list, go through our contacts in our phone and say, well, they wouldn't be interested, and they wouldn't. But you never know. And so if you are in tune spiritually, you're praying and you're devoting that time to the Lord and you're giving this trip to him and you're being vulnerable for him to do what it is he's called you to do. He's going to lay people on your heart. He's going to say, reach out to them, and you'll be amazed. You'll be so fascinated at how many people are just intrigued by this trip. You're going to have coworkers, you're going to have family members. They're going to ask. You're going to have easy opportunities to share what you're doing. Hey, what are you doing this summer? Oh, well, let me tell you, I'm going to the Amazon, and right there, it's going to draw their interest. And then when you tell them why, we're going to take medicine, we're going to do a water well, and so on and so forth. Listen, people, even people that you may work with, people in your neighborhood that may not even be believers, they may not even understand the spiritual aspect of this. They're going to be very intrigued by the humanitarian part of it. And so, cast a broad net, don't say no for people. And listen, I like to tell my teams, I really believe that this part of the trip, the fundraising, it's really the first part. Steve just talked about, kind of sharing your testimony. Listen, I think this is kind of a part of that. This is a testimony to others that this is what I'm doing with my vacation that I have this year. I'm going to the Amazon to share Jesus. And man, what a powerful way that is to tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, your coworkers. even as you go through the fundraising part. And so you'll find lots of people will want to help you. They'll say, "Hey, yeah, listen, I want to do that. I want to support you. Let me know how." And you're going to share your link with them. We'll talk about in just a second. But like you and me, they're busy and then they forget. And so it's okay to share deadlines. It's okay to send reminders to say, "Hey, friend, I know you said you want to help support my trip. Well, I have this deadline coming up, March 15th or whatever it may be." And so don't be afraid to follow up with people, especially those who have expressed an interest in helping you. And so I mentioned the public profile. Again, on your managed missions account that you created when you filled out your application, you can go back, log back in to your managed missions account, and you'll see a button that says public profile. Okay. And so you can go in. This is where you can get a personal link that you can edit, you can modify, you can, certainly would encourage you to put your own picture in there. But it's a link that you can use to send out, of course, via text, email, your social media channels. Again, to invite people to take this journey with you. One of my favorite things when I'm there in the Amazon, I'm in a village and maybe giving a farewell speech. Hey, we're so glad to be here in your village today. I love telling those villagers, listen, you see the 25 of us that are here, but there were literally hundreds of people who made this happen. And so again, that's where the fundraising comes in. You have, your team will literally engage hundreds of people that will be a part of this trip, and you'll be able to share that with those villagers. And so use that public profile. If you write support letters, which I think is a great idea, we have a template for that. You can go again, resources, AmazonOutreach.org, go to resources. You can find that template there. But as I was saying earlier, be specific about your deadlines with people. We have certain deadlines in our fundraising, especially that second $1,000. If you've logged into your account, you see some of those deadlines. They're already pre-built into the trip. And that really is for when we buy plane tickets and all those things. And so those deadlines do have a purpose, certainly on our end. And so the more that a team member, an individual can try to honor those deadlines, the easier it makes it for us to make sure that we get you there. And so, electronic is definitely the preferred way that you fundraise using your public profile, but you will have people occasionally want to give you a check and we can process that. And so that check really just needs to be made out to Amazon Outreach. It needs to have your name and your trip name in the memo line, and it needs to be given to your team leader. Leaders who may be hearing this today, we have protocol for this. Again, you can find that in the leaders materials in our resources page, but we can certainly process a check, when we need to. But one important thing, whether a person donates online or via check, is thank them and maybe more of a formal thank you, maybe a note to them, let them know, thank them once you get their donation. But then what I always like to do, for my boys, they write support letters. And then what we'll do after the trip is we'll produce a letter, a follow-up letter with some pictures from the trip, maybe some statistics. This is how many villagers we saw. Maybe this is how many salvations, so on and so forth. And then we're going to send that back out to those supporters. And so we want to report. We want to report back again using this fundraising part of the trip as a means of giving testimony to what the Lord has done in you and through you on this trip. And so, again, certainly fundraising, Steve mentioned earlier, prayer, when the enemy is going to want to discourage, and sometimes we see the price of this trip, and the enemy may discourage us through that, but he doesn't have victory over that as long as we're in prayer and we're approaching it the right way. And one thing that helps me is to remember that all this fundraising is really a means to an end. It's a means to getting you to the Amazon for those divine appointments. And so Steve's going to talk about some of those ministry opportunities that you have once you're in the village.
I think, Chad, let me just kind of bookend that with the statement that everybody wants to see a miracle, but nobody wants to be in a position to need one. And what fundraising does, oftentimes it puts you in a position where you just, it's just the Lord because you financially can't go. But with humility and hard work, you have to do your part. It's interesting the tension in scripture where Lord's Prayer, we're to pray for our daily bread or for our trip fees to be coming in. But also it says a man that doesn't work shouldn't eat. So there's this opportunity that we have to work with God in fulfilling those prayers by going out and planting seeds and then reaping a harvest. So look forward to hearing maybe some miracle stories on your trip, how God provided. Uh, as I said, this is training number two. You should have had an interest meeting where this was covered, but just in case you didn't go to one of our awesome trainings and you just find yourself saying yes and you're not really sure what your opportunities are due, let's talk about that just real quickly. I'm going to go through it very fast. But we're always looking for medical people, doctors, dentists, nurses. We've got a full pharmacy on our boat. Again, to not sound like a broken record, go to our resources page and you'll see the medical ministry. That's where you can see our formulary. You can see the medicines that if you as a provider can bring. There's also over-the-counter ones that you can bring as well. We'll talk more about that when we talk about supply list in our next train or in a future training. So you guys are the tip of the spear, that and dentist. We also use hygienists and those who can assist. And so I want to encourage you that are on the medical team, dental team, or the tip of the spear. You funnel all the other ministries because they have the felt needs of relieving suffering. And because of that, they end up in the other ministries where they're receiving Christ. So, vital part of the whole strategy. Jesus healed and then preached the kingdom, and you bring healing. For those of you that don't know what you're going to do, Eyeglass Ministry, these are readers, is a great ministry. If you love people, you love Jesus, you can literally give the gift of sight in the name of Jesus with a Bible. And so the Readers Ministry is a great ministry. You're also going to have opportunities for devotionals and sharing testimonies. Again, we're going to teach you how to do the testimony. But if you have a devotional you like, you may have opportunities on the boat or in one of the ministries to do that. So you might bring that with you. If you like to lead worship, there's worship opportunities, preaching opportunities. There's other ministries like the photo ministry. This requires extra equipment. We'll cover this in one of our future trainings. There's a link of a portable Bluetooth printer that you can print off your phone. They love getting pictures. And then there's different skills some of you have that doesn't really fit neatly in any of these boxes. We've had people that were skilled at doing the balloons and VBS, hair people that knew how to cut hair, physical therapists, audiologists bring their own equipment and do specialized ministry. So all kinds of different ministry opportunities that you're going to be able to have on this trip. Uh, there we go. I was going to say it was froze there for a second. And then we have our ministries of Vacation Bible School. That's in the morning and the afternoon. You're going to need to prepare for about 80 kids. I mean, sometimes it's much smaller, but you want to have enough. You'll need to prepare for a morning session, an afternoon session, and you'll duplicate that usually for 4 days. So really need two VBS presentations with crafts. And then teen ministry, talk to Chad if you would like to know some good ideas. Chad's really good in this area. That was his field of ministry for 16 years before coming to the Amazon Outreach. Women's ministry, we love women. In the morning, we do what we call the Amazon Salon, braiding hair, painting fingernails, just loving on the ladies. And then the afternoon is the men's and women's meetings, which probably the most spiritually impactful part of the whole day. For the guys, you're typically going to do door-to-door evangelism if you're in men's ministry in the morning, and in the afternoon, we have the men's ministry meeting. And then, of course, there are opportunities for ladies also to be on the door-to-door teams. That's usually done primarily in the morning. All of that's gearing up for the men's and women's ministries in the afternoon. Now, we hope that you're well prepared. We're going to be asking you to pick a ministry to be involved in. Let your team leader know. And we're going to need a leader for each of these ministries. And if you've never been, you're like, well, how could I do that? Well, again, on our resources page, there's a ministry opportunity summary with people you can call in each ministry, like a doctor, dentist, DBS. If your trip leader may be able to give you the guidance you need, but if not, there's a resource there for you to learn how you can best do the specific ministry in the village with that resource of the ministry opportunity sheet. There's also a lot of great little training videos that we have on our YouTube channel. If you're over the men or over the women's or VBS, there's good summary videos there on how to do those ministries. Eyeglass ministry, I think, is one of our newest ones. Photo ministry, we just added. But if you end up on the river and you haven't had time and you find that you're over something, let me give you just a good formula for whatever of these ministries you might be in. And it's a three phases you can use for any ministry: ice breaking, testimony, and gospel. Ice breaking is the thing that most Americans speed through too quickly, whether you're on a door to door evangelism visit or you're in the men or women's or teens ministry. You want to spend time getting to know them, finding out about their lives, who, what, where, why, and when. Really care about who they are as people and try to build rapport with them. Ask them if they have questions about your life, about what things are like in the U.S., and just really spend time getting to know them. And that's one way you just tangibly show that you care. At some point, if you're leading it, you want to transition and say, well, we've come from the U.S. and we're followers of Jesus, and we're here to encourage people to follow Jesus here as well. In fact, Chad would love to tell you about what Jesus has done in his life. Is that okay? So then Chad shares his 3-minute testimony because he came prepared. And then Chad finishes up and he's going to say, and Steve would like to share with you how you too can have a relationship with the Lord. And I'm going to be prepared to share the gospel. And that's the most simplest way to do any of these ministries. But you can get as elaborate as you like, or you can make it that simple. But the main thing is you need to be prepared in advance. But there's a lot of great ways to serve the Lord. All right, I'm going to pass it over back to Chad now as we talk about if I can get it unfroze here. It keeps going over the same one. There we go. Okay. I know people have questions about
All
what does it
right.
look like on the boat and the trip and the village. So Chad, give a quick summary of that.
Yeah, and so it says typical day. It doesn't say exactly precise day. One of my favorite words that I use with my teams is we call it the Portuguese word orso, ORSO, which is not a Portuguese word at all. It means that we're going to start at 9 or so. Okay, and so it kind of emphasizes the flexibility that's required, but we do have a structure, kind of what a typical day looks like, just so you have a good expectation. One of my favorite parts of the day is the morning. It's the quietest part of the day. It's the coolest part of the day. That's where you see a lot of people, doing their morning devotional, just maybe having some quiet time, enjoying a great cup of coffee as the sun rises. Then we'll do breakfast at 7, and then a great time before you get off the boat is at 8 o'clock. We're going to do a team devotional. And so, again, that can look however a team decides to. We don't have a lot of, strict regulations on that, but certainly encourage you to do a devotional. Have some people prepared to share a word with the team. You'll hear from, hopefully from the river mission partner that you're with. They'll kind of give you a rundown of what's happening in that village. What to expect. How to approach those particular people. Where they're at, and their knowledge of the gospel, if at all. And so then we'll get out and we'll do village ministry from 9 until noon. We'll come back to the boat and eat lunch, and then we're going to honor their culture. They like to take a break in the heat of the day from noon to about 2. So we're going to do the same thing, give your team a chance to rest and recoup. And then we'll go back out into the village from 2 until, about 5:30. That's, especially in the summer months, that's when it gets dark, is about 5:30. So the captain of the boat's going to want to make sure we're back on and safe and all those things. Um, but usually we spend one day in each village, and so before we leave that day, we may play soccer at the end of the day. Certainly, we'll have a farewell message before we get back on the boat. Then at 5:30, we'll eat dinner at 6. We'll have a team debrief after at 7-ish or so, right? And this is a great time too to share. So I encourage you not to skip that team debrief at the end of the day, because this is a great time. You're going to have people who were working in medical that didn't see anything else the rest of the day, or they were working in VBS, they didn't see anything else the rest of the day. And so it's good for your team to kind of share what happened over here and over there, because the Lord's going to be doing lots of work all over that village. And then after that, there's going to be some free time. One night there'll be some jacare hunting and whatnot, and then lights out by 9:30 or 10, because we're going to get up the next morning and do it all over again. And so one of the biggest questions I get from people is, well, how much do I need to prepare for VBS? And so, kind of looking at this typical day, just for you VBS folks that may be watching this, you need basically a lesson plan for your morning, a lesson plan for your afternoon, and then something that's repeatable, for 4 or 5 days in a row, because typically you're going to be in 4 to 5 different villages. But really two lesson plans, one morning, one afternoon. All right. And so moving on, or really kind of circling back to visa information, making sure that we get there. This is, we'll just say, a necessary evil of this trip. Again, it's just one of the hoops that we jump through. There was a couple years there where Brazil did not require visas for U.S. citizens. Well, they do require that again now. But fortunately for you guys, we've had a whole year of experience going through this. And so it is ever changing, but we have a pretty good handle on the process. And so, really, what we're encouraging people to do is, for the most part, I think most people have success now going through the VFS global site. That's the government site there in Brazil, where they process the visas directly. It's $81. It's a 10-year visa. And so, we have lots of returnees on these trips. And so, if you get your visa this year, it'll be good for the next 10 years. Um, you can apply for your visa even without having your plane ticket. You guys all have contracts, for your teams, but you don't have those tickets yet. You don't have anything to upload. And so if it does ask you for your itinerary for a plane ticket, you can just use your passport, just scan it in and put it in that spot, in that slot, and it should take it. Okay. For minors who go on this trip, whether they're with a parent or with they're not, okay, it's a little bit more difficult for a minor to get a visa. They can do it, and we have minors all the time that do this. There's just a few more hurdles that they have to jump over. Um, we were recommending at one point to use a third party site, and certainly there are benefits to that. There are really pros and cons to using going straight through the government site or using a third party site. The third party sites do offer a little bit more communication, a little bit easier to get a hold of, a little bit easier maybe to get some feedback. The downfall is if the government denies the visa, the third party is going to have really no way of being able to tell you why they denied it, and so you're going to end up having to contact the government directly anyway. But that is an option. One of the biggest things on the visa that people probably have trouble with is the picture, just getting the picture right. They want to see ears, they want the background has to be just right. It has to be white, no texture. And so that is one advantage of using the third party site is they do tend to help a little bit with the picture. We've kind of found that if you take the picture with more area in the frame around you, then they can kind of manipulate it to where it's where it needs to be. So again, that's totally up to you if you want to use a third party site or not, but that is an option. And again, we have all this information in our resources tab under eVisa. But you are going to need to carry that printed visa with you. So I mentioned that earlier when we talked about passports. You're going to need that printed out visa. You cannot use your phone, can't show a PDF off of your phone. It's got to be printed out, paper copy visa that you carry with your passport that you will need entering into the country of Brazil. Okay.
Hey,
Um,
Chad, before you move
and
on, Chad, sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
Before you move on, this would be a good point to just say you need more than one copy. You'll want a backup copy.
yes.
And I'm sorry if you were going to cover that somewhere, but we, if you lose that, then you've got a backup. And it is good to have it digital if all else fails.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I carry a backup copy on my phone for sure in case I lose the paper copies. But yes, they will require a paper copy. And so to apply for your visa, okay, like I said, you can go to the resources tab. You're going to need your passport. So as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have a passport, that's really step one. Get started on your passport. Um, going through the government site, the VFS sites, they have asked before about your flight itinerary. Again, you can use your passport if you don't have that, if you're not ticketed already, which most of you would not be at this point. And then, like I was saying before, a passport type photo. You can take this photo on your own. You don't have to go to Walgreens or anywhere to have it professionally done. I actually, when I did our visas for my family a year ago, we used our cell phones. Now, I was able put the picture on my computer, white out the background, and they took that. If that's a little bit out of your area of comfort, then you might want to get go have a passport photo taken somewhere. But you can take the photo yourself on your cell phone. And so there are some extra documentations that are going to be required for any minors, anyone under the age of 18. Again, you can find all these on the website, that notarized consent form from both parents. If you have a situation where maybe one parent, a child only has one parent, and maybe the other parent is estranged, is not a part of that child's life, let us know if that question comes up. We've already had that before a couple times, and we'll kind of let you know how to fill out that paperwork if that's the case. But you'll need an affidavit of support, which is basically saying, who is supporting this child financially while they're in our country of Brazil. But on that minor's visa application, both parents' IDs, again, if both parents are in the picture, for that child, both IDs. It asks for a passport. If a parent does not have a passport, they can use their state issued, driver's license or what have you. But that will be required to get that minor's visa. And then you'll need that minor's birth certificate. And so, listen, let us help you. When you have questions, if you're a team leader, certainly let us know. If you're just a trip member, direct those questions to your leader. And if he or she cannot answer those, again, that's what we're here for. All right. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Steve, and he's going to talk about, hopefully this doesn't happen, but if you do have to cancel, he's going to kind of share with you what that process looks like.
Yeah, this only happens to 1% of our team members, but it's such a big deal because we're dealing with, significant amount of money that we want everybody to know in advance what to expect if something happens out of your control and you have to cancel. So there's going to be two types of credits you'll potentially have if you've put money in and then you have to drop from the trip for something that you have no control over. But it's very important to understand how this works. Here's the 30,000 foot view of your fundraising, and especially if it came to the point where you couldn't go on the trip, is that all fundraising for your trip are non-refundable tax deductible donations to Amazon Outreach, and they are not contingent on your participation on the trip. The reason your family and friends can give for your trip, or even you, and it be tax deductible, is in reality and legally, you're just a fundraiser for Amazon Outreach. That's the way the government looks at, or anybody that gives to your trip. There, you're not really paying for your trip. You're fundraising for the mission to do the trip, and you get to go if you successfully raise the amount of money which is your goal. So hopefully that makes sense. You get to go on a free trip if you raise the 3,500 or 32 or whatever your trip amount is. Another important thing is to understand you're going to hear about the insurance that you have, but it's medical travel insurance. It's not trip cancellation insurance. If you want that, you'll be on your own to get that. So if you have to cancel, don't say, hey, I need to use my trip cancellation. That's not the kind of insurance you get. AO provides as part of your trip fee medical insurance while you're in Brazil. And a quick side note on that, if you were to have an incident in Brazil, it has to be documented there because if you come back and say, hey, we had a guy hurt his shoulder on the trip, he decided to wait to get back to the States, but he got no documentation on the trip, so they would not cover it because they said, well, we don't know what happened there. Our boat, we can get you a medical certified document showing that if there was any reason. So make sure and be aware of that. Hopefully, you won't, most people, 1% of the people or less ever need that. But if you do, just know that it's only medical insurance and you need to get it documented when you're in Brazil. If the trip is postponed, you're unable to go, you will have a AO trip credit. Again, it's not refundable, but we want you to go on the trip. We're going to give you 2 years to go. So if you canceled this June, you can't make it the next June, you could go June 2028. Now, after that, we don't keep this forever. Don't come to us 5 years later and say credit. We just can't keep up with that long with credits. If you don't do it within the first 2 years, it becomes a donation to Amazon Outreach. So thank you for our charitable purposes. You could also transfer it to another team member. So that's another option. Again, we want you to use it. You were successful in helping this happen. We want you to go. And those are the how that works. All right. And then there's another type of credit you may end up with, and that's what's called an airline trip credit. So for simplicity, let's say that your trip cost 3,000 and your AO was 15 and your airline ticket was 1,500. Well, if an airline ticket's purchased when you cancel, and that's when most cancellations happen, it's something, a week out and the ticket's purchased, you've raised your full amount. Well, that amount gets deducted from your AO trip credit because we no longer have that money to apply to your trip. Now you're going to have a credit with the airline. It's different from AO. They're not as gracious as we are. It's going to be in your name. We cannot use it. And here's a very important thing is you only have a year of the date of purchase to use your airline credit. Unlike AO, you don't have 2 years, and it's got to be from the day it was purchased, not the day of your flight. So most of the time, teams have the same trip the next year. You won't be able to use that credit because it's purchased usually 2 months before your trip dates. And so we want you to be aware. If this were to happen to you, you'll get an email from our staff giving the details on how to use that credit, but it wouldn't be able to apply for the same trip the next year because it will expire. So, do anticipate that the airlines will deduct significant fees for cancellations and reissuing fees. Uh, they're not as gracious. We charge no fees for cancellations, but they do. So we want you to know what to expect if this happens to you. You'll be prepared and know what to expect next. All right, so Chad, wrap us up here with the next steps. And I'm going to do a brief demo at the end, and then we're going to have our breakout rooms, and then that's when we'll answer everybody's questions. So, Chad, why don't you give us our next steps?
All right. Priscilla has already sent out all the meeting dates like this. So we have two more after this one, online, Zoom meeting trainings. And so go ahead and add those to your calendar. Make sure you don't miss those. Again, and we've kind of, harped on this already, but if you haven't filled out the managed missions application, or maybe you didn't fill out all your information, or maybe you didn't have a passport when you fill that out, and now you do. Make sure all that information on managed missions is up to date. That's going to be very helpful. Go ahead and pay your deposit just to reserve your spot. That lets us know, you've got some skin in the game, so to speak. You're all in. And then, like Steve mentioned earlier, let your leader know kind of which ministry area that you think the Lord may be calling you to. It's never too early to start thinking about that, praying about that, preparing for that, and how you want to do that. We've talked about vaccines today a little bit. You can look at that vaccine list, see which of those that you may need. One that I didn't mention earlier, that you do want to make sure is up to date is your tetanus shot. Those are good for 10 years. And so if it's been more than 10 years since you had a tetanus vaccine, I certainly would encourage you to do that. But start on those. Like I said earlier, check on your passport. Make sure it's valid for at least 6 months post trip. Be practicing your Portuguese, and you can do that, a number of ways. We've got some examples there: Duolingo, Google Translate. We have people who do lots of things. Make sure you kind of know when that first $1,000 deadline is coming up. So again, all this is in your managed missions account. Team leaders, you can go in and schedule team meetings, and that can be on your team's calendar of to-do list. And then if you already have your passports, like we said earlier, go ahead and start that visa application process. You may still be several months away from your trip, but you don't want to wait to the last minute on the visa thing, because I think I mentioned earlier, man, the visa the visa process is really all in the eye of the beholder of that agent who's processing that day. And we've had a few, not many, but we've had a few people who were not able to go simply because they waited too late to get their visa, and just some of the red tape they had to jump through, they just didn't get it done in time. So don't let that be you. Okay. Go ahead and get started on that visa process. And in the meantime, as you anticipate your trip, and you look forward to being on the Amazon, whether it's your first time or you've been, 5, 10, 15 times, you can go online and get some AO swag. Again, this is on our website. You can go on and get some of our Amazon outreach merchandise that, certainly helps, support the mission and the ministry that we're doing. But what a lot of you guys are going to want to do is certainly follow our social media channels, our Instagram page, our Facebook, and then our YouTube. We've mentioned multiple times now today, that we have a pretty extensive video library. And so if you go to YouTube and you do a search for Amazon Outreach, man, you can find several playlists there that have all this information we've shared and then lots more. All right. And so Steve, I think, is going to give us a quick tutorial here and we'll be
Yeah,
good.
we're going to wrap it up. Normally we would be ending, but I think this is worthwhile to give us just a few more minutes before we actually finish this training. That's going to be manage missions. So this is where your fundraising, this is everything that you need to know about your trip will be in manage missions. So how do you get there? Just go to managemissions.com, enter the email that you signed up with and your password and you're going to have this great resource here. So the trip that you're going to have a menu over here. This is trip details. This is like your home page. So it gives you all the details about the trip, all the documents. If you would need to know what the itinerary for the flight's going to be, you're going to find the flight contracts here, the overview of your trip, just real basic information, your team meetings. That resource link we always talk about on our websites in here under links. Your leader may add some extra links in here. My info, that's where you're going to click if you need to add your passport information later, if you got it after you applied, your meetings, tasks and goals, fundraising. So that's where you're going to go if you want to pay your deposit. You can just pay for my trip, do the $250 deposit here, or if it's deadline for the 1,000. But for half of you that we're going to have to fundraise, this is that public profile that you saw that Chad talked about earlier. This is where you're going to go to this link here, and you can change the verbiage here, make it more personalized. I want to encourage you to upload a photo of yourself here, and then you're going to hit publish and save, and it's going to create a link like this. And people, you can do this, as Chad said, social media, on emails, and people can give online. It tells about, and it also explains this is, a tax deductible donation, not contingent on me going. Uh, but I'll have a credit if I don't. So it tells your donors they're giving to Amazon Outreach, not to you personally. Again, that's what makes it tax deductible. So that's a quick overview of Managed Missions. It's going to be managemissions.com. It's going to be your best friend to get information for this trip, pay for your trip, to fundraise, to thank your donors. All that happens on this one resource here. I mentioned the YouTube channel quite a bit. So just search Amazon Outreach when you go to YouTube, look for our logo. There may be a few imposters out there. More than likely, it's going to take you to Amazon.com, but find the real Amazon Outreach and click on that. And it won't, for some reason, it isn't working for me. Okay, well, there it is. I don't know what's doing that. Well, let's say I'll try it a different way. Okay, there we go. It wasn't the way I'd planned on getting there, but you want to go to playlist and so many of the things we've talked about. If you want to learn how to use the e-ball, evangelism, all the trainings that we're doing are here under team training. So we know we've covered a lot. If you want to go back and review it, your team leader will probably be sending the video link that Priscilla will be sending out. All the training videos that we've talked about here, everything from fundraising training to sort of a typical day, which Chad talked about. You can actually see it in person. Some of my favorites more recently is how to hang your hammock like a pro. Art of Sleeping in a Hammock's a great one. This is probably the one you'll enjoy the most right now, the AO boat tour, where you're going to eat, sleep. What's the boat like? Here's Priscilla's Brazilian Portuguese top 10 that I mentioned. Here's the information that Chad covered on the visa. So just a wealth of information on our YouTube channel. And then on our website, as I've mentioned, last resource. So when you go to Amazon Outreach, just amazonoutreach.org, you're going to go up to the resources tab. If I can get the picture of Chad out of my way there. Go down to resources, and there's everything that we've talked about. Your medical ministry, there's how to do the e-visa, all the important information. You can't get it without going here. Like you've got to have an address in Brazil. Well, all that information is going to be here. Uh, We mentioned the important team information. And I know I'm going fast. Again, you'll get this video, but all those different great resources you're going to have, everything from, I mentioned travel insurance, that's actually will tell you what it covers, Portuguese words and phrases, minor release forms, just so many great tools, dress code. We're going to tell you how to pack. There's actually a great packing video. So, anyway, we want you to go prepared. Again, when you're prepared, everybody wins. You win, the village wins, the missionary wins. And we want to thank you for taking the time to get prepared to fill the villages with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. So, we're going to open it up for questions.